So they were out in the aisle, or they would say, I can't vote. District 11 chairman and former chairman of
Everybody hear me? Yeah. Live sound check here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started since it's 2 o'clock. My name is Jeff Rose. I am the chair of the Democratic Party in Buncombe County, and I want to welcome you all here for this debate. It's great to see so many people here on a beautiful day outside. I mean, there's Leaf Festival going on. There's all sorts of stuff that we could be doing, but instead, we're here to be part of a conversation about public education. And I really appreciate you all being here. So give yourselves a round of applause. A couple things I think we're going to ask of all of you before we get started. Our debaters are going to introduce themselves. I'd just like to ask everybody to please be respectful of both of the people who are debating here today. Let's make sure we give them time to make whatever statements they want to make. Let's let them express themselves, express their views, and let's remember we are the audience. We can show our support, but let's let everybody have the opportunity to speak. We really appreciate that. We are going to be going for about an hour and a half is the plan for today. And a couple of people have asked if there would be an opportunity for questions, and I think we'll leave that to the end to see how much time there is at the end of this before we decide if there's going to be question and answer. But I think we'll probably have a few minutes for everybody.
I think the last 30 minutes should be questions.
There you go. Last 30 minutes question and answer. Okay. So again, thank you all for being here. We have an email sign-up list up front if you want to get emails from the Democratic Party, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our debaters here because I know everybody's here to hear from them, not from me. So thank you.
Introduce you, please. We're going to take turns introducing each other. And by the way, I think most of you are here to either discover how, if this gentleman is as nifty as you've heard as a Democrat, or I'm as big a rascal as you've heard as a Republican. We'll see. Senator Jackson's career in public service began after the attacks of September 11th, to his credit. when he enlisted as a private in the Army Reserve. He deployed to Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and was stationed in the tribal region north of Kandahar for his year-long deployment. After he came home, he attended law school at UNC Chapel Hill with help from the GI Bill. Jeff's military service continues to this day as a captain in the JAG Corps with the Army National Guard. He drills monthly with the 130th Maneuver Enhancement Brigade based in Charlotte. Prior to joining the General Assembly, Jeff worked as an assistant district attorney and tried over 100 cases ranging from DWI to first-degree murder. Now the youngest Democratic state senator in North Carolina, Jeff has helped build a bipartisan coalition to end gerrymandering, has formed the state's first early childhood education caucus, and has helped pass a number of bills to modernize our criminal laws. Would you give him a hand, please?
Dr. Mumpower is a psychologist currently serving as the chairman of the Buncombe County Republican Party. He previously served for 8 years as a conservative voice on Asheville's governing body as a councilman and vice mayor. He was also the 2008 Republican candidate for the 11th District congressional seat against former Congressman Heath Shuler. Raised in Asheville and the Black Mountains, Dr. Mumpower graduated from Owen High in 1970 and subsequently volunteered for service in Vietnam. He began college studies on his return and eventually completed a BA from St. Leo College, an MA from Western Carolina University, an MSW from the University of Georgia, and a PhD from the Union Institute. He is licensed as a doctoral level practicing psychologist and has maintained a private practice with adults, children, and families over a period of almost 4 decades. And he tells me he loves what he does. Dr. Mumpower is a father and a grandfather and delights in both. His favorite quote comes from Ernest Hemingway: "Never mistake motion for action." His favorite role models are Ben Franklin, Winston Churchill, and Jesus. Not necessarily in that order, he tells me. He notes that his debate experience is very limited and was mostly crafted in trying to talk to his high school principal, talk that principal out of calling his parents when he consistently and enthusiastically got in trouble. That last trend has remained a theme. Dr. Mumpower is voted Western North Carolina's favorite villain in the Mountain Express year after year, as he told me to say, and I'm honored to introduce him to you. Thank you, sir. And can I say on a more personal note how honored I am and how much I appreciate what he has done here, really, in bringing us all together. He was the one who invited the whole state to come and debate him on any issue. And I have never in my political career seen an invitation such as that. And in coordinating this event with him, it was just my absolute pleasure to work with him. And this is going to be a wonderful debate that I've really been looking forward to. Doctor.
I believe you have the floor, sir.
Okay. Well, I think that's appropriate that I should go first because, frankly, I think the burden in this debate is on me. Because I'm the one saying I think that we should significantly increase our investment in public education. So what I'm really saying to you is I think you should help us pay for new things in public education. And if I don't convince you of that, I think the tie goes to Dr. Mumpower. I think the burden is on me to prove to you that these investments are worthwhile enough to justify paying for them with your tax money, because that's how this happens. So when I think about public education, I start with 2 basic principles. The first one is I think we have a moral obligation to give children the tools they need to escape poverty. And the biggest tool is public education. 25% of our children in North Carolina live in poverty. That's a remarkable number. And that is a problem we can solve. It is within our political ability. It is within our fiscal ability. It is not a pie-in-the-sky notion that we can solve that. Because that problem is so solvable, I see it not just as something important, not something that should be high on the priority list. I see it first and foremost as a true moral obligation. And that's the first principle I bring to my thinking about public education. The second is that I think we have an economic obligation to gear up for the automation tidal wave that is about to smash into our country and our state. Politicians need to start leveling with people about just how quickly the economy is about to start changing. Robotics and advanced software are going to be an economic force that reshapes all of our lives, especially our children's lives, in ways that we can't possibly imagine. But here are some easy predictions that we can credibly make. 5 million people in this country drive vehicles for a living, trucks and taxis. 4 million work in retail. 3 million are cashiers. 2 million do customer service. Folks, no matter what any politician tells you, a lot of those jobs are going away. And they're going away in the near term. We have an economic obligation to make sure that we are prepared, because that's the hard part of the conversation, those jobs that are certainly going away. The good part of the conversation is that we are probably on the brink of a new industrial revolution, and there will be abundant opportunities if we take this time right now to make sure that we're prepared. And the biggest part of preparing is upgrading our educational infrastructure. Those are the two big organizing principles that I use when I think about public education. One, moral obligation to allow children to lift themselves out of poverty. Two, an economic obligation to gear up for the automation tidal wave. And when I put those together and I look at the landscape of public education, I see 4 major areas where we need to upgrade. First and foremost, early childhood education. We should have started doing this right decades ago. But now the evidence is simply overwhelming. We have to do more there. We're going to talk more about that later. 2, we need a great teacher in every classroom. That means you actually have to pay teachers so you can get great teachers, so you can recruit them and you can keep them. We're going to talk about that more. 3, community colleges. Community colleges are going to be where most of us go to upgrade our skill sets mid-career. They're going to become even more central to the lives of our citizens than they are right now. So we need to bring tuition down. Tuition at AB Tech is about $3,000 a year. For a lot of you, that wouldn't keep you away, but for a lot of our citizens, it will close the door. And we need those doors to our community colleges to be wide open. Last, we need to invest in a robust apprenticeship program here in North Carolina. Very few states are doing this right. North Carolina could be one of the only states in the country to have a real, robust, private-public partnership between the private sector and our technical educators in order to fill jobs that exist in that moment. We can do this in a really cost-effective way. It's not going to do a ton of damage to the budget, and it would make an enormous difference. We know that there is this stigma about everybody needs to go to a 4-year college, and we need to get rid of that. We need to move past it. One of the ways that we move past it is by giving apprenticeships, by making that a viable option. Elevator repairmen earn $75,000 a year in this country. That's a job you get through an apprenticeship. And incidentally, in Oregon, elevator repairmen earn an average of $100,000 a year. I don't know what's going on in Oregon. We should all be repairing elevators in Oregon. We did the wrong thing. The average wage, starting training wage for an apprenticeship is $15 an hour. The average starting wage upon finishing your apprenticeship is $50,000 a year. We could be the state that says to all of the companies, new companies looking for someplace to move, come to North Carolina, and we will help you train the workforce that you need. That's a major upgrade that we need. Early childhood, teachers, community college, and apprenticeship. Those 4 main areas. I'm not talking about throwing money into public education willy-nilly. I'm talking about making strategic investments to meet 2 core challenges: reduce child poverty and meet the economic challenge of the automation tsunami that is most certainly headed our direction. Thank you.
I agree with essentially everything that my colleague said, except the primary solution. The resolution, by the way, I believe, is that we should increase funding for public education in North Carolina. Am I stating that? Yes. And my colleague is for it, I'm against it. I'd like to tell you why. I'll initiate my end of this good effort by saying thank you to our host, the Democratic Party of Buncombe County, my opponent, and all those in attendance. It's been said you could be doing other things today. It's great to be a small part of a small step toward finding a better way to address our differences, because when you get right down to it, we're probably here more about that than we are the core subject. To find a better way to find the way to the truth. I'm here because I believe that no society can survive itself without a firm attachment to that last word I gave, truth. So ironically elusive in the information age. It's getting harder to find the truth, not easier. It is what is arguably the best of the four-letter words. It's within truth's demanding embrace that I will speak firmly against the resolution that North Carolina should significantly increase its investment in public education. May I begin by noting we're not here to debate the merits of public education. We probably stand pretty close on that. It's my assumption that my colleague and I are on that common ground, however imperfectly, and we both view this as one of the noblest parts of the American system and our history. We don't disagree on the what so much as the how. As we pursue this, I'm hoping that I can demonstrate to you that money is proving to be the least of our worries on public education. America's history in public education can be reduced to two words familiar to the academic professional: didactic, and dialectic. In these two approaches, we find evidence of both a fulfilled vision and the corruption of the sincerest mission of public education, that being the institutional provision of a level playing field of exposure to knowledge from which all may reach for their potentials in what we like to call a land of opportunity. Until fairly recently, the didactic model, per its simplicity, defined public education in America. In contrast to its fraternal twin, the agenda of the didactic model is clear and definable to impart the time-tested wisdom of the ages into fresh, hungry minds. Its methods are characterized by a sharing of facts and values, tendered to validation and other rewards for those who best absorb them. You're familiar with that model. You use it as parents. You use it for potty training. Memorization, repetition, and clarity are the tools of the didactic model, and it has served our society extraordinarily well. About the time I entered the first grade, a new model, the dialectic, began to assert itself upon America's public education system. That it began in our universities and has reached its sputtering apex in today's version of such lends credence to those who would argue the exchange of models was more a corruption of our system than an enhancement. The dialectic model holds that truth and fact are more subjective than most humans, amidst the insecurities of an infinitely complex universe well illustrated above our heads, would wish. In the genuine heart of the dialectic model, we find the word reason. In this approach, much like in today's undertaking, we seek to debate the various perspectives on truth and presumably land on the argument proving itself most worthy of our attentions and convictions. Would that it be so easy. For as you will see, it's not the absence of money that we find the foundation of our failures in public education. My colleague is very wrong about that, and I will work hard to demonstrate his error. The constraining point of our 21st century education system is not green. It's more like the color and consistency of smoke. I reject the resolution with the certainty of one coached by the best applications of both the didactic and dialectic models. I take strong personal offense to those who would misapply either to the stated agenda of so many champions, forgive me for my use of the word, of the left. the subversion of America's traditional success equation. It's my position that the failures of our education system can most specifically be tracked to the intentional mishandling of our children, our classrooms, our culture, and our communities. Under the leadership of a parade of bright, articulate social manipulators concealing their lust for power behind, on both sides of the fence by the way, behind a mask of compassion, we have been led away from a stellar vision of public education to a hollow and habituated house of pretense. It is encouraging that my opponent and myself are both here to address failure. Our dramatic divergence is how best to recover. In his arguments, my liberal colleague curiously defers to the much maligned offspring of capitalism, money. While I, the much maligned advocate of conservatism, would have you defer to something far more complex, reason. It will be educational to see which view prevails. Thank you.
I take Dr. Mumpower's basic premise to be that the problem, as he said, is not funding of education, but how our educational system is currently structured. And I think to a person, every single person in here would agree with at least some aspect of that. I think we could establish, even early in this debate, unanimous consensus for the proposition that we all have recommendations to make to the public schooling system, things that need to be done differently. I think if we did a poll, every hand would go up. But I also want to see if we can reach some common ground on a proposition. So here's my question to you, Dr. Mumpower. Even assuming that everything you said is true, even assuming that we have a deep flaw at the core of public education and our curriculum, let's talk about early childhood education. Because there, I think the problem is not so much how we're educating children at a young age, but the fact that we simply are not. Only about 30% of our children have access to high quality early childhood education. The problem there, at least in major part, would appear to be simply the provision of funds to make sure that all children at least have access to this system. At which point, we could have a subsequent conversation about the manner of their education. But as to that, 0 to 8 years old is the literacy bridge. If you don't make it across the literacy bridge, if you're not on grade level reading by 3rd grade, the odds are you never will be. And 60% of our kids don't get across the literacy bridge. If you don't get across, you've got a 2% chance of graduating from a 4-year college. You have an 8% chance of graduating from community college. Of our juvenile delinquents, 85% of them are functionally illiterate. So early childhood does amazing things for social development and cognitive development. 90% of the brain is formed by age 5. So it's important for those reasons alone. But literacy, folks, you don't learn to read when you're 8, you don't learn when you're 7, you start when you're 3. Katie is over here. I spoke to her beforehand. She taught 3rd grade right here in Asheville. And she told me there are people who show up to 3rd grade on a kindergarten reading level. And it is almost impossible, despite her best efforts and the efforts of every 3rd grade teacher in the state, to get them to proficiency by the end of 3rd grade. And the reason that's such a critical benchmark is because 4th grade is when you're supposed to go from learning to read to reading to learn. And if you don't make that transition, you watch year after year as the rest of your peers pull further and further away. We have thousands of kids showing up on the first day of kindergarten, never having held a book, not knowing their names, not knowing a single letter in the alphabet. And I don't think the difference between didactic and dialectic is sufficient to explain that. So don't you agree?
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. There's no arguments that the earlier we educate our children within reason, the better. It's what parents start doing from day one. There are good arguments as to whether parents should be doing that, or teachers, or government entities, and I'd opt for the family. And I think that's a big part of our problem. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. So, how about that? Before those children ever darken a kindergarten door, a lot of them are lost. It's not a matter of a corrupt curriculum, although I do think that is a concern. It's a corruption of our culture. We're abandoning and betraying far deeper issues than what go on within these walls. Ask your teachers, talk to your teachers. Now, there are a lot of issues for them, and I'll talk more about that. They don't control their classrooms like they used to, bureaucrats do. But ask your teachers about when they have 20 children and 8 of them are on fire. How do you do that? Ask your teachers when you have 20, 25 children and 5 of them come from a public housing development where people are having shootouts and getting murdered and dealing drugs all night long. And I'm exposed to that frequently. What do you do with children that come in at 4 or 5 or 6, whatever age you start at, that emotionally have had to grow up far too fast and have the gaps in their development that occur when that happens? Our teachers are set up to fail, and no amount of money is going to fix that. We're doing it better, arguably, with early childhood education than we've ever done in history. And it's not working because we're chasing the symptoms and not the problems. Thank you.
I agree that we do spend a lot of money in public education chasing the symptoms and not the problems. I think we spend a lot of money. As a former criminal prosecutor, that was my job, was to deal with the symptoms. And so when I had the opportunity to run for the state senate, I thought this is my once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to address the root causes of so much societal failure that keeps us so busy in the criminal court. It just felt like shoveling sand into the ocean every day there. So I certainly share his concern about that, and I share a lot of his concerns about cultural problems, as I imagine every single person in here would. The first 90% of that, I'm on board. But the last 10%, I think he moved kind of quick, because he said no amount of money can make a difference here. And I beg to differ, because it's not money in particular that makes the difference. It's how many kids we can get into high quality early childhood education so that we can reduce the number of kids who are illiterate. I think if we spend right now about $250, $300 million a year in North Carolina on early childhood education, with another $190 million, give or take, every at-risk 4-year-old in the state would have access to pre-K. I think that's money worth spending because it helps meet our moral obligation to those children. As Dr. Mumpower said, a lot of kids are showing up to the first day of kindergarten already too far behind. This is how we address that. And it helps us meet our economic obligation. If we're producing citizenry that can't read, they are not going to be able to import new skill sets at multiple points in their career, which is exactly what all of us will be called upon to do. There simply is a financial aspect to this. And wishing that more parents spent more time reading their kids and solving this problem for us is not going to change the numbers. So I guess my question would be, if you had a very high level of confidence in the effectiveness of early childhood education, and I know there's a big debate about that, and I think that's a worthwhile debate, because we need to make sure taxpayer money is spent well. But if you reviewed all the science, and you came to the conclusion that this works, and that if we spend $200 million in North Carolina more on this to bring the total to about 450, we could reduce the number of third graders who aren't proficient by 50%. So instead of a net total of 40% deemed proficient, now 60% would be proficient in exchange for spending $200 million. Would you consider that a worthwhile investment?
I have done the research and I have read the material, and I think a lot of it is fake. I think it's wishful thinking. I love the idea of the simplicity of that. I think we all do. We all recognize we live in very troubling, frightening times. And I wish it were money. I wish it was more classroom access, but it's not. Our problems are systemic. We're treating this like it's a first-degree burn. It's a third-degree burn. And you can put Vaseline on a third-degree burn all day long and feel like you're doing something, but you're not. You're actually distracting yourself from the real business at hand. Now, what is that real business? Well, I'll speak to it specifically, and I'll talk more later. Folks, you can't run a culture without morality. I was speaking to a colleague a little while ago at a luncheon for an 85-year-old friend, and she said, you know, there's something weird going on in our country now. The people I used to see, they would come in for a problem, and I would help them with that problem, and we'd work together, and they'd get on about their business. Now the people I see come in for a problem, and before we're done, they've created or bumped into 3 or 4 new problems. My wife is a nurse. She's been a nurse for a quarter of a century. And she says the people we're dealing with now are far sicker and have far more things wrong with them than when I began. And it's gotten steadily worse. Look at our criminal justice system. Look at the number of people we're warehousing in prisons. Look at the number of minorities that we're imprisoning. Spend some time, those of you who have the courage, go to public housing and just drive through. And if you've really got some courage, drive through about 10 o'clock at night. And if you're real bold, go through at midnight. And watch what we're doing to people and forcing them, and that's what it amounts to. We've got 5th and 6th generations in public housing in Asheville to live there. Watch what we're doing to children. And there, if I'm not mistaken, we have a public housing development within a mile as the crow flies from here. And those poor children have to endure that, and they come to school with the darkness that's touched them. And they come to school with your children who have not known that. And it's an horrific collision of discrepancy. And it is my suggestion to you all and my colleague that I wish money would do it, because my answer to his question would be yes.
What is your solution? I'm not hearing any solution.
Well, ma'am, I'm trying to answer his question. I appreciate your patience with me as I do it imperfectly. If you want me, will you echo her question, sir, and may I respond to it?
Sure. There was a question from the crowd about what your alternative solution.
What are your solutions? Our judicial system is a mockery of what it could be and should be, from the top to the bottom. The point of accountability is so absurdly out of sync with reality that by the time in this community you have to deal meth or crack and get caught 3 times roughly before you go to jail or have accountability. And that process takes forever. Well, folks, I'm a psychologist. When you talk about managing behavior or encouraging other people to manage their behavior, you have to have accountability, not that's harsh or mean, but it's quick, it's efficient, it's immediate, it gets their attention. And we have a culture, a drug culture here that is out of control. absolutely out of control. And I would suggest to you that our judicial system needs major attention. I would suggest to you, those of you that feel that drugs are an innocent distraction from the stresses of life, need to really reflect on how you're participating in the deep-rooted corruption of our culture. I would say to you that yes, we do need to do better with education, but not with money, but how we educate people. When I went to high school, I hate to bring up the past, we had people that we knew weren't going to college. Heck, I thought I was going to work in the blanket factory. That's why I went to Vietnam as an alternative. But those people were channeled toward trades and taught trades and connected with trades, and they weren't made to feel ashamed because they didn't want to go to Chapel Hill. We don't do that today. The dropout rate in our black culture in Asheville should make us cry. You hear all kinds of numbers. It is from looking at it as close as I could for a long period of time, I think it approximates 40%. That's absolutely a travesty. And we need to go after that, and you can't do it with money. And you certainly can't do it when you have a school within a school. I don't believe in that. I think that's condemning a large group of people to mediocrity. Now, I could go on and on and on, but I hit 5 things that I think we need to do differently to address the real issues and not the symptoms. Thank you for your question.
Well, I think we've got some areas of common ground. I think that I share a concern with him about the judicial system. Having come from the judicial system, we could have a whole other conversation just about that. We'll put that for another day. Remarks that he made about the fact that we don't value trade schools and trade jobs, vocational jobs, the way that we should, absolutely right. I think expanding apprenticeships is a good way to address that problem. It's relatively inexpensive because it's a public-private partnership. I agree that high school dropout rate is a major problem. Almost all of your high school dropout rates, almost all of your high school dropouts, rather, are folks who do not get across the literacy bridge. If you want to tackle the high school dropout rate, you can't do it in high school. You will be minimally successful and you will spend a ton of money trying. If you make sure all of your kids get across the literacy bridge, the dropout rate goes way down and future wages go way up. Unfortunately, we did not reach common ground on the importance of early childhood education. I will disagree with him as to the validity of that science. I think you could stack the science from the floor to the ceiling. I think we have known for decades how effective it is, but especially as neuroscience has gotten incredibly good over the last 15 years. If you know nothing else but that 90% of the brain is formed by age 5, how can that not reshape your thinking about public education and how we need to allocate funds? There may be another area, and to move to another segment of public education, I think there may be another area where we could establish some common ground, and that is with teachers. And we can have a big argument about curriculum. We'll save that for another day. I want to address the teacher shortage problem. Here's the basic problem. And part of this is good. It used to be that if women wanted to work outside the home, they had very limited choices. They could be a nurse, they could be a secretary, they could be a teacher. Now, women can do anything, so they are, and that's great. And that is raising the market rate of teachers. Because women graduating from college say, I can do all of these things with my skills, I'm going to go where I'll be rewarded, where I'll be fairly compensated, and increasingly that is not education, especially not in North Carolina. So we are developing a major teacher shortage. It seems to me that before we can have a debate about didactic versus dialectic or any method of education, we have to address teacher quantity. And one of the ways that we do that is by addressing compensation. We need to get our pay up to something close to the market rate. We also need to address professional development. Teachers are telling us that they want to become better teachers over time, and we all know that experience matters and that on-hand mentorship matters. Does anybody happen to know how many dollars we put in the last budget for the professional development of teachers? Zero! That's zero. So maybe a little money there makes sense. Not all of this comes with a price tag. Lots of teachers tell you we need career pathways overhaul. We need ways to get promoted while still staying primarily in the classroom. Right now, the conventional means of getting a promotion and getting a higher rate of compensation as a teacher is to become an administrator and pull you completely out of the classroom. We don't need that. We need to update to give teachers more responsibility if they're interested in accepting more. That will result in higher compensation. That doesn't come with a huge price tag. That's just reform of the thinking that will ultimately, ideally, attract more people to the profession. So, Dr. Mumpower, and I'll close with this. Of our schools of education in North Carolina, which are our teacher factories, enrollment is down 30% across the board. Before we can have a big debate about curriculum or even teacher quality, there appears to be a major teacher shortage coming. Do you agree that adjusting compensation to something closer to the market rate would help ameliorate that problem?
There are a lot of things that would help. I don't know many things that money doesn't help, but that's not really what you're suggesting, sir. You're putting money at the top of the heap. I don't even think it's in the top 5. I'd like to echo or return to something. We both agree that we call it the formative years. The first 5 years are crucial. Where we disagree is the solution. I don't think it's a classroom. I think it's a cultural, community, and family issue. We're careless with our children. Most of them, and teachers will tell you this, are damaged before they get to the classroom. Giving them an extra year is not going to fix that. In terms of what is going to attract teachers and what do we do about the shortage, I think a starting place is to quit treating them like prostitutes. Most teachers do not go into education for the money. They go into, allow me, please. I appreciate your extra patience with me. I'm not here to be mean or unkind or abusive. I am here to be honest, and if you'll allow me that opportunity, I'll do that. Our teachers don't go into education for money. They want to eat, of course, and they want to live comfortably and have a retirement, of course, very reasonable. Our teachers go into education from their heart, not their pocketbook. They go into education from their mind. They want to touch young lives and help them get across that slippery, slidey, icy bridge between childhood and adulthood. And we're taking that power away from them. Our classrooms, you want to talk about solutions? Let me give you one. Teachers are not in charge of their classrooms. Federal and state bureaucrats are in charge of our classrooms. Political correctness is in charge of our classrooms. Fear and attorneys are in charge of our classrooms. And teachers are getting eaten up in that equation. And then frankly, a lot of troubled students are in charge of our classrooms. I'm blessed to be a psychologist. I'm a psychologist because I spent a year in Vietnam and I wanted to do something different, and I'm glad I did. And in that capacity, I get to talk to a lot of teachers, a lot of nurses, a lot of people who are servants to our culture. I also get to talk to a lot of kids. And I get to talk to a lot of kids who say, I can't learn. My teacher doesn't care, she's burned out, and they recognize it. And so many of the other kids don't care, and they're violent, and they're abusive, and they're disruptive. That's why we can't hold on to teachers. It's not the money helps. But you can't give them enough money to make up for stealing their classrooms. And that's what we've allowed to have happen. Thank you.
I spoke to a woman here before we got started who is in school right now to be a teacher. And Lauren, wave to everybody. Hi, Lauren. She wants to be a teacher. And I asked her why. I told her why she wants to be a teacher. I said, why? She said, because I like kids better than grown-ups. So I said, well, we're very happy to have you here in North Carolina. We need more teachers, more qualified teachers. And she said, well, I'm not sure I'm going to be a teacher in North Carolina. She said, I'll consider North Carolina, but right now I'm looking at Colorado and I'm looking at Georgia. Georgia pays teachers much more than we do. If you're not from North Carolina, if you don't have a family here, if you can graduate and go wherever you want, you're going to obey some basic principles of capitalism. You are going to go where your skills can be most highly compensated, and that is not here. And that is not leading just to lower quality, that is leading to lower quantity. I'm from Charlotte. We advertised for teachers going into last year's school year on Craigslist. Not ideal. It's not how you want to recruit.
May I respond?
Oh, sure, go right ahead.
Every state in the country is having trouble with teachers. Every state. There are no exceptions.
Texas, they have a lot of recruit teachers.
There is no exception to that. And that is my illustration of the core point. It's what we're doing with our teachers, not how we're paying. Paying matters, but what we're doing. I want to hold up a chart. Probably can't see it. It's popular to say that we're not funding education, we're not trying, we're sinking into the abyss. But folks, we are making a difference. And I would offer to you that across the country, better than 50% of the states of the 50 states have lost ground on funding teachers and the whole spectrum of the academic experience since what is called the Great Recession. North Carolina is an exception to that. One of a number of exceptions. One we should be proud of. Now, you don't hear about that. Is it perfect? No. But they're making an effort. And I'd like to stress that. It's not that that funding doesn't matter. It's just one of many variables, and we are having some success with it.
I'm glad that we got there. This is a really important piece of this conversation. Doctor, can I borrow that chart for a second? Ah, yes, just as I thought. Not adjusted for inflation. Adjusted for inflation, which is to say, in real numbers, this red bar is lower than this blue bar. We absolutely are spending less across the board than we were 10 years ago. Teachers, adjusted for inflation, make less. We spend $1,000 less per student than we did 10 years ago. 6% of our teachers, but gained 100,000 kids. So here's the story of taxes in the last 5 years as it relates to public education. And this is really important stuff. We have, as the state legislature, passed $3 billion worth of tax cuts in the last 5 years, give or take. That's out of a $23 billion budget. So $3 billion is real numbers. That's a big chunk of change for us to cut in taxes. And the tax cuts, you won't be surprised, went overwhelmingly to the wealthiest folks and the largest corporations in the state. So, for example, if you earn on average $1.5 million a year, as most of you do, you get $20,000. If you earn $44,000 a year, you get $175,000. And here's why $3 billion in tax cuts has had such a dramatic impact on public education specifically. Here's how we spend our money as a state. Of every dollar, 55 cents goes to public education. By far the biggest expenditure. The next biggest is Medicaid. That's 25 cents on the dollar. And that's our 1/3, 2/3 match with the federal government. So you really can't cut it. So that, just education and Medicaid, gets you to 80 cents on every dollar that we spend. The next 10 cents, that's courts and prisons. Good luck finding spare change there. When I fired up my computer as a prosecutor, I got a green blinking cursor. That's the level of investment we've made in courts and prisons lately. That gets us to 90 cents. Another 5 cents is interest on the debt. Another 2 cents is parks. And with the remaining 3 cents, we try to fund the rest of state government. So when you pull $3 billion out of the system, there's only one pot of money big enough to fund it. That's public education. Dr. Mumpower said North Carolina has been an exception since the recession, and he is certainly true. That is correct. We have been an exception in that we have locked our public education spending into the recession. Our public schools haven't left the recession. That's why we have horrible metrics across the board. We have, regarding spending, regarding the amount of teachers that have left, we have fired 8,000 teacher assistants in the last 4 years. That's 35%. Those folks exist almost exclusively to help get kids across the literacy bridge. We used to call them reading assistants. We are now 43rd in the nation in per pupil spending. Last year we were 42nd. We just went down. Virginia is 25th. South Carolina is 34th. Kentucky is 20th. In order to fund all of these tax cuts, not only did we cut public education or make a decision to chronically underfund public education, but we decided to eliminate the Earned Income Tax Credit, which raised taxes on 900,000 people, the child care tax credit, the medical expense deduction, the small business deduction, the student tuition deduction, the college savings deduction, and the mortgage forgiveness deduction. All of this coming at the expense of the middle class and investments that we're trying to make sure that we can meet our obligations going forward. You cannot be serious about meeting our moral obligation to help children escape poverty or meeting our economic obligation to help meet the oncoming automation tidal wave and ignore the fact that we have just given $3 billion from public education to our wealthiest citizens. I'll leave it as another question because I'm genuinely interested in your response. The Republican legislature raised teacher pay by $100 million this year. The governor had proposed several hundred million. They did $100 million to their credit. We're now 35th in the nation in teacher pay. Dr. Mumpower, according to you, all of your arguments so far would have been against that decision. So I guess my question is, do you disagree with the decision by the Republican legislature to raise teacher pay this year by $100 million, which averaged about $35 a month on average for all of our teachers?
I applaud the decision. That has nothing to do with why we're here today, which is to suggest that money is the answer. It's not. My colleague just pointed out that 55% of our revenue stream is going to education. Does that sound like we don't care or we're indifferent? That's a fascinating figure. I want to also share, I'm afraid, sir, you take liberties with this inflation issue because if you look at the statistics across the board, every state is faced with that reality, and North Carolina has done far better than most in trying to stay ahead of that inflation curve. And may I also suggest that everybody in this room is faced with that same reality? How many of you, maybe 10%, can say since the Great Recession that you've stayed ahead of inflation? And we're the most employed community in North Carolina. That's not the reality for us or most other people. We're sinking in our dollars. We're sinking in our opportunities. We're sinking economically. And to pretend that inflation is just some isolated thing that you can pull out there that doesn't have across-the-board impacts, we're all struggling. And of course our education system is a byproduct of that because it's funded out of your pockets. A lot of that money comes out of your pockets. And by the way, I take exception to the rash use of the word wealthy. I know that's easy. You know, it's like Rambo. He always had a bad guy you could go after. We can't fix this stuff with good guy, bad guy thinking. We got to be more sophisticated than that. We've got to be more sincere than that. You know, there's a difference in wealthy and productive. And if you look at the Republican model, and I'm not saying we're all sincere to it, we do believe you should reward the most productive people because they're the ones paying for all this stuff, especially the things that we do to try to take care of other people. And we both believe in that. We just disagree with how you do it. And I'll finish with this. Another chart. Found it pretty easy to mock that last one. I found it exciting. Well, this chart is 12 states cut general funding per student this year in education. This is 2015 and 16. These are the 12 that cut. Alrighty, and down here below New York, and New York puts more money into education. New York and California ebb and flow. New York, I think it's roughly $24,000 a year per student, which is triple what we do. New York didn't raise the bar as high as North Carolina did. Here's North Carolina at the bottom of the page. Look how hard they tried. That's 2015 and 16. They took it up another notch this year. You don't see that. You don't hear about that. And the reason is, or if I might say, we all care, but it comes back to that. What are the priorities? What are the balance? Where do we balance best? And throwing money is not what North Carolina Republicans believe in doing. But we do believe in trying to make it better. And it's evidence right here. And I'll be happy to share it with you after we're done. Thank you, sir.
Some common ground. I agree that we shouldn't attack wealthy people for being wealthy. I believe that we should resist engaging in class warfare. Some of you may disagree with me on that. I don't know. However, I don't think I did that. What I would do is I would say, look, if we've got $3 billion that we're thinking about using as a tax cut, instead of having that decision being driven solely by ideology, which is what I feel happened, let's bring in some economists. Let's have a big conversation about what gets the best return on investment. Let's bring data into this conversation. Let's make a realistic assessment of exactly what the economy is going to need in the next 10 years, what we're going to need as far as teachers in the next 10 years, and let's make a decision based on that balances the importance of protecting business growth and the importance of supporting public education. That we can reach that balance, folks. The reason why people are up in arms in this state to a certain extent is because they feel like the attempt, the basic attempt to try and have a balanced set of priorities has been completely thrown out the window in favor of a far-right, hard-driving agenda. And having had a front row seat to it, that perception is accurate. That is exactly what it's like. I want to try and reach some common ground before we close, because we're getting up to our hour here, I think, unless someone's keeping time. It feels like we're going for that. I'm not just here talking about spending money on education. I also think there's a way that we can save money. So I hope that we can agree on this. I think we can save about $45 million a year by eliminating the voucher program. Your taxpayer dollars, over 93% of all the voucher money goes to religious schools. Look, you have a God-given right and a constitutional right to send your children to religious school. But we, as taxpayers, are kind of all in this thing together, irrespective of each other's faiths, because we have a common interest in making sure that all of our children can at least read. And we want to make sure that if we're sending tax money into a school, that school won't deny entrance to our children simply by virtue of their faith, which is what these schools do. Schools that will will not take your children because some of these schools require parents to sign that they 100% agree with the religious doctrine being espoused. There are no metrics about academic quality coming out of these schools. There's no testing. That we have no way of telling whether or not they're actually educating children. There is no financial audit process. We don't know what they're spending the money on. In Milwaukee, at least, they have financial audits. Turns out one guy was spending all the tuition on Mercedes for himself. We don't know if that's happening here. We should. They plan on tripling the amount that's spent on vouchers for a total over the next 10 years of $1 billion. I can give you a lot of better ways to spend $1 billion than that.
I'll try to find the question in that. I'll share a couple of points first before we do our closing. Vouchers are an effort to introduce competition into a failing public education system. That's a good thing. Number two, try to track, talking about accountability, no accountability, try to track what the budget of an individual county school in Buncombe County. They do it as a whole. You can't do it. And if you can't track it, you can't hold people accountable. So please don't talk about accountability. I don't think that's what our system is about. Okay. I left my youth behind in Vietnam. Went there when I was 18, joined the service at 17. I left it there. It's okay. I missed some things. I gained some things. I learned a lot over there. Vietnam is number 12 in the world in their education ranking. And do you know what most of their classrooms look like? It's a bamboo shack with an 80-year-old desk and a beat-up chalkboard and whatever else. They don't have money. Their teachers don't teach for money. Their system isn't designed around money. It's designed around something else. They know what it's like to suffer, and they want their children to have something better. I would argue with you that if you look across the world at the top 20 education systems, half of them are third world countries. It's not about money. It's about a whole lot more complex things than the epicenter of capitalism. Are we ready for our closing?
I think we're ready for our closing. Was that your closing, or do you have
No,
another closing
I'm
in your
going to
mind?
close.
Okay. Common ground. I agree cultural values matter a great deal. Cultural values affect every aspect of our lives. They certainly enter the public education space, and teachers can tell you 1,000 times better than I could exactly what that means for them every day. They have to take children as they come. That's the law. They're not allowed to say no to anybody, even if they can tell that this child has terrible parents who aren't reading to him or aren't feeding him. They have to take that children. They have to take that child, and it is our obligation to give that child whatever they're not getting at home. Because otherwise, if for no other reason, that child is doomed to repeat the cycle. And if we don't make a strong intervention, we never get to stop having this conversation. If we don't make a strong intervention, if we don't see the science and the data and say we have a real strategy, it is not throwing money, it is actually investing to accomplish something specific. If we don't do that, we never get to stop having this conversation. And the symptoms of poverty will always plague academic performance. If we can get past that, if we can significantly reduce the number of children living in poverty by increasing the number that get across that literacy bridge, we can have other debates that we need to have about public education. But we are going to be held back by this ball and chain of 25% of our children living in poverty, 60% of them not being proficient in reading, until we take that really seriously. And folks, it ain't free. It's just not. If there were a way to cut something and free up an extra few $100 million, we'd all be in favor of it. That's not there. This is actually going to cost us something. But I think almost every single one of you would be open to that. You're going to demand scrutiny. You're going to demand results. You're going to want really capable people in charge of that, and those are the demands you should absolutely make, because every dollar that's being wasted is a dollar that could be better spent on another child. You have every right to be really concerned with how every penny is spent. But folks, I think I can make a strong case that this is worth it for you. This is worth a long-term investment on our part. If we can look back 15 or 20 years from now and say, we made a long-term investment, and look at our rate in North Carolina, look how many children are reading, look at the effect that that's had on high school graduation, at community college graduation, at university graduation, we will never regret having made the decision. The same way we don't regret the major decision we made in the late 1800s to start a university system, or the major decision we made in 1957 to start a community college system. We don't regret that. Those investments are part of the reason why our economy is over twice the size of South Carolina's. We decided to make those major investments, and we never looked back. There are new major investments we need to make, not just because they feel good, but because we have specific things we need to accomplish. Folks, I think we're going to do it. This debate aside, I think the amount of energy and the amount of evidence behind this is just too big to ignore at this point, and that's the good news. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have some advice for you. Never have spicy tacos for lunch before you come to a debate. 30-something years ago, the most successful personal growth author in America was Christian psychiatrist Scott Peck. You may know him for his work, The Road Less Traveled. I love him for another book, People of the Line. In that less famous but prophetic offering, he presented frightening testimony. He said roughly this: America is busy creating a generation of liars in business, industry, government, education, the law, medicine, and the church that will one day take the heart out of our country. He was right. We are at that time. And it is that loss of connection to truth that grounds our failures in public education. We are no more honest about our issues in public education than we are with governance, medicine, or social issues, or about anything else in America. If you're looking for why such a blessed land of opportunity can't seem to solve any of its problems, look to that disconnect first. Whether it's by international comparisons or state by state, the correlation between money and academic outcome does not exist. There are too many liberated thinkers coming off of dirt floors for us to validate that simplistic thinking. Money matters, but it's not even in the top 5. So what is? System commitments to high standards, functional cultural values, teacher and student motivation, parental and community engagement, and a dedication to realism born from deprivation. America is struggling with 1 for 5. The mission of fixing America's public education system does point to some low-hanging fruit. Number 1, put teachers in charge of their classrooms again, and thus the heart of what they do. Take our teachers out of the deadly trap of responsibility without authority by reinserting control in the hands of the one closest to the fight. Number 2, rethink the importance of the family as the bedrock for any sustainable culture. It is not coincidence that as our families have disintegrated, dropout rates, crime, drug abuse, and associated miseries have grown. A flower cannot grow without protected and fertile soil. Number 3, remove the undue influences of teachers' unions and detached government bureaucracies. Step over your fear of competition toward the maverick innovation that always hails the emergence of something better. Always. Stop confusing the gifted grace of liberal education, and I view it that way. I was liberally educated, with teaching our kids to be liberals. They're two different things. There's a crucial difference that seems to have gotten lost in our education system. Remember that morality matters. I really want to hammer this one. Remember that morality matters, for without it, we are not safe. And if we're not safe, nothing in our culture works. Stop selling the lie that drugs and casual sex are normal and innocent and without meaningful consequence. Don't force children to live in dangerous environments, public housing. They grow up too fast and with too many gaps, and then they bring their pain and anger to school. Number 8, forget the concept of schools within schools. As I've said, that marks, to me, surrender of the majority. Number 9, understand that public schools are a participatory team sport. Too many of us just drop our kids off at school and hope for the best. I would suggest to you that's a form of abandonment. And you can see it in the eyes of too many kids in too many schools. And finally, remember that money is the playground of those who like power and politics, not service. Teachers want to eat, but like mothers are more motivated by the opportunity to love and make a difference. We've taken that away from them, and we're trying to buy their silence. I'll conclude with my earlier reference to the fraternal twins of education, didactic and dialectic learning. In today's America, we flip these concepts upside down. We're misusing didactic techniques to hammer in political correctness, not facts. We're using dialectic techniques to recycle liberalism, not encourage reason, discourse, and questions like we've had today. Every despotic government in history relied on those means to subvert their culture. Allow me to conclude by suggesting that our schools are becoming prisons of conformity that frustrate, discourage, and fail too many of our children. That matters not only for their future, but also that of our country. Whoever controls education controls tomorrow. Those selling money as the answer are knowingly or unwittingly distracting us from real solutions. That's not an educated mission. Thank you for this opportunity. Questions?
I saw your hand first, sir.
I first want to say that both of you obviously put out some good things out, and so I thank you both for coming today and talking about those things. I do take some issues with a lot of things that the students are being indoctrinated with. I think that teachers should be given raises to match what they do, and obviously teachers are very important to what they do to our society, to our culture, to our economy, and everything else out there. But if you're not teaching them the right things, the things that they should be, rather be liberal or if it's doing something the Republican things, if we're not teaching them the right things, then no amount of money that they are getting paid isn't even worth it. We should be teaching them about things, kind of go back to where we started and start instead of going liberal with everything or going Republican with everything. Now, I'm kind of Republican, I say that, but I also don't think that everything either party says or does is going to be perfect for the education of school. We have a lot of people dropping out. Most people cannot afford to go to college. Obviously, we want to pay more and put more money into the education system.
Tom, my friend, what's that question?
Huh?
What's that question?
Okay, so I'll give it to you. So how do you think it's going to be possible to take all this information that we need to give our kids just by simply giving raises here and there and do what we call tools? Do you see that as how do you see that as possible?
Okay, well, here's how. I think we need more children to know the alphabet. And I think that in order to teach them, a lot of them to early education in the form of preschool and pre-K. Otherwise, a lot of them aren't getting it. I genuinely don't feel there's a liberal and conservative way to teach the alphabet. Maybe some teachers here can correct me. If I were you, I wouldn't be too concerned. I think we can establish a lot of common ground on the importance of literacy. And if you and I agree on that, I think we're probably also going to agree on some investments that we need to make sure that children are exposed to the alphabet and exposed to reading and are being really actively taught reading. And we can have a big debate about how you teach AP American history in high school. And there's going to be a difference of opinion on that to some extent. But I don't think there's going to be much difference between you and me about the importance of learning how to read and how to teach children to do that. And it does cost more money than we're spending right now.
It can be argued qualitative learning is loosely connected to the alphabet, quantitative learning to numbers, and math. And I would argue we absolutely can corrupt the alphabet. We've already done it with new math. That's one of the craziest, most frightening, overwhelming. I am fascinated by how many students I talk to. We talk about losing kids who get lost in new math.
You don't get it. You're not in the school.
I chose the last question. I think you should choose the next question. I chose the last one.
Well, we've been over here. Let's, in the green t-shirt? Yes, ma'am. And we apologize if we don't get you in order. And if we could ask that we keep our questions kind of narrowed down a little bit so my colleague can respond and myself will.
You know, in a perfect world, everybody would come to school loved and cherished and well taken care of, but that's not the reality. We get everybody in public school. We get the kids that are loved and cherished. We get the kids that are abused. We get the kids that are hungry. We get the kids that have learning disabilities. We get all those kids, and the teachers are then expected to educate these kids with very little resources. With students that have learning problems, you have dyslexia, you have dysgraphia, there are certain teaching, research, scientifically proven methods that you can teach those kids how to read, that didn't know how to read. You can teach those kids how to write, that didn't know how to write, but it costs money. I mean, Mr. Jackson's exactly right. It costs money to train teachers on how to do those.
I think she's making a great point, though.
So, my question to you is, knowing the reality that we have these kids, there's zero professional development guidance. What's your solution to providing these teachers with the tools they need to help these kids in the classroom with learning disabilities, with behavior problems, with emotional problems? We have lots of kids in public school now with mental health crisis. So how do you address that?
I think the point is that the Republican-controlled legislators have attempted to put more of the money where the rubber meets the road, the students, than on the teachers. You're not getting fancier equipment or classrooms like you would want, or develop, educational funds. Those are all good things, but they're trying to direct it toward the kids. And per that chart, that kind of makes sense to me, and we're succeeding at it, not perfectly. It's a question of priorities. That's what my folks who I support in Raleigh believe in. But back to your question, I can't believe, allow me to answer your question. I can't believe I did this, but I left one of the most broken pieces of our culture out, the mental health system. It's crazy. And I'm someone that knows. I've been doing this since the 70s, and I've watched North Carolina go from having one of the best, trust me, mental health systems in the country, known throughout the country, to one of the worst. It's totally dysfunctional. You can't fix mental health problems in a school. You can't do that. Teachers can't do that. A whole lot of those problems that you just mentioned can't be fixed in the school. Not suggesting that you do, and I don't think that we do.
And what we have to do is, if our kids don't qualify insurance, they don't get anything. You have to qualify for Medicaid to get any kind of help.
Well, folks, that's absolutely true. May I make the point that there is no magic bucket of money? And we seem to think there is. It comes out of your pockets and his pockets and my pockets.
Tax me.
And it is, you cannot create a perfect system. There's no way we're going to do that. And you seem to be suggesting that, that somehow that's going to happen where it doesn't happen anywhere. It doesn't happen in the state of New York, and they spend 3 times what we spend. Go to New York City, and my niece, who I cherish, lives in New York City, has a new child, and they're going to do one of 2 things. They're going to move. And she, by the way, is as far from me as you can get politically. They're going to move, or they're going to put their kid in a private school. And New York City is arguably funded better than any system around. They're a microcosm of the failure that you talk about, and they do no better than we do at salvaging the weaker, more vulnerable, more needing in terms of support people in our culture, those who go through. They do no better than we do, and they've got 3 times the money.
Great tank top.
Hi, I'm a communist, but it doesn't really apply here. I hear
Welcome to Asheville.
Oh, I've been here a long time, 23 years. 2 things you guys are agreeing on that I'd like you both to address, because I think we could have had a really good discussion had you stayed there. 1, our teachers don't have any freedom in the classroom anymore. It's awful, the intrusion of bureaucracy, and they deserve to get paid more. It's 2 things. They're not mutually exclusive. They are so dedicated and they so want to be there, and I hear that you guys you can agree on that. So, how do we get these great teachers? How do we free them up to teach again, which they are not getting to do? And how can we make that work? That's a place you guys agree. 2, kids aren't getting what they need before they're 5. Kids aren't getting what they need before they're 5 years old. In many, many places, for many, many reasons. How do we spend money? How do we get people to help to fix that problem? You both agree it's a problem. Whether it's cultural, whether it's societal, whatever it is. But reading changes everything. The ability to read changes everything. How do you each approach that problem? Those are my 2 questions. Thanks.
On the first one, regarding the intrusion of bureaucracy in the classroom, my instinct as someone who's not an educator is to listen to you and to listen to all the other educators. But I feel like if somebody really listened to you and tried to fix the problem, there are probably things that we could all agree on in that space. That's my first instinct. I don't know, but I'm here to listen to you. Second, how do we build a political will to address the fact that so many of our children don't have access to the early childhood education they need? Well, I think that's good news. I think there is unanimous consensus for the proposition that no child deserves to live in poverty. I think I can get 100% on that one. And that's not a trite political phrase like freedom is good. I mean, if we all agree unanimously that no child deserves to live in poverty, and we see from the evidence that the most effective and cost-effective method of solving that problem is one and the same, is an intervention in early childhood, then we're just going to go that direction.
Good question, and you don't sound like a communist. Because actually, I think that's part of the problem with our educational system. The communists are in charge. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke to the extent centralized bureaucracy is in control. Centralized bureaucracy is in control. And that's where I think you have to start. Teachers' unions and centralized. All right, can I answer the question? Appreciate your courtesy and patience with me. You can't have, I've experienced this in Vietnam. I sat in little spotter planes as an observer, and we'd be flying around at 3,000 feet, and over here would be a helicopter with a major or captain telling a poor second lieutenant on the ground how to fight a firefight. You can't do that. You've got to give the people closest to the real world reality control. And I don't think it's going to happen. I think the bureaucracy is tightening up more and more. Here in Asheville, back when I was on the city council, we had a nifty thing come up called the 10-year plan to end homelessness. Now, how do you argue with that? Well, as you might guess, I attempted to, and it turns out I was right. It was a silly concept grounded with some legitimate efforts to help and a fantasy. And you remember, I think I shared my favorite quote, never mistake motion for action. We're not going to fix the classroom with a lot of motion and a lot of platitudes and a lot of we agree on all these wonderful things. We're going to do it with real effort and work. And the 10-year plan to end homelessness is just like has been suggested here. Let's do all these wonderful things. It's not that easy. We've been throwing out these nice words for years and years and years, and our system is getting worse and worse and worse. And folks are laughing at people like me who say, get back to the basics, folks. Family, morality, fix your mental health system, fix your judicial system, fix your tax code, which I would not argue is okay at all. I agree with those who think there's things wrong with it. We have to fix those things because the kids are broken before they enter the classroom. Do I pick the next person? I want to be fair. You've had your hands up for a while. You'll decide which of you are going to ask a question.
I'm a public school teacher.
Would the person who's more conservative please stand up?
I don't know, we have to fight about this. This is my son. He's in college here in North Carolina, but I'm a public school teacher. And I appreciate you saying that you want to give teachers more autonomy. It's absolutely needed. We're being constricted more and more about what to teach, how to teach, timelines to teach, how to make assessments, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much going on there. But I really have a problem with this notion that there's it's either the student versus the teacher, or that because teachers are looking to be fairly compensated, that it takes away from our concern or our desire to teach. You know, I have my master's degree. I've been teaching for over 10 years. 2 to 3 times a week, I run after-school programs that I do not get compensated for. I leave at the end of the day, and at the end of the month, I'm wondering if I can cover my bills. It is August, and I have bills stuck to my calendar waiting for my first paycheck. I love to teach. That's why I do it. I was actually doing something else for 10 years before I went back and got my master's degree. Teachers have no incentive to get their master's degree anymore. It's not compensated. In North Carolina, I'm lucky enough to be grandfathered in. But to keep saying that it's not about teacher pay makes the teachers who are looking for more compensation feel like they're asking for too much, and it's not true. In my family, I'm
May I
the
answer
offer.
your question?
So I just want to know why is it either we care about our kids or we want to be fairly compensated? No one wants to get rich.
I think if there's a video that comes out of this, if there's a video that comes out of this and you watch it, I think you will find that I didn't say it didn't matter. I just didn't think it's the
It's
answer.
lower than the 5, and on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is need.
Doesn't have trouble meeting their bills in your reality today, please raise your hand. Everybody. I don't think you're alone.
Keep your hand
I
up, you're a
think
teacher.
that's the American reality now for a whole lot of people, and you won't find me arguing about whether that matters or not. It matters a lot. I believe in capitalism, but our system is broken now, and you're not the only one suffering. You are, and it does matter. It's not in the top 5.
But sir, I think you have to raise that from the bottom of the top 5 to higher up, because you're losing people. When my kid
And in college, you might be losing people like me who do really well in the classroom and have a passion. But if you can't keep me, we're going to go. And I speak for many.
I hear you, and far be it from me to argue with you. I think you make good points. We just disagree.
Lauren, future teacher. Stand up, I can't hear you.
It's a less serious question, but I wanted to know your comparison between teachers and prostitutes.
Can't hear you.
She wants to know why you refer to teachers as prostitutes.
Like you made the
Because we're trying to buy their gifts. I'm sorry, folks, that's what you're talking about. We're not talking about fair compensation here. We're talking about ignoring so many things that's taking the heart out of teachers and throwing money at the top of the heap and pretending that'll fix it. It won't. That's treating you like prostitutes. I'm sorry if you take offense, I believe that.
Your turn.
Pick somebody?
Yes.
Anybody have a Trump hat on in here? This guy who's taking the time to create a video. Yes, sir.
Well, I hope I get a lot of hits on
this.
Sir?
Will people be able to get a hold of that video?
Yeah, just go to YouTube, type in Jerry Rice, put Buncombe County after it, and you'll get it. Thank you both. I think it's great to have a good debate. I love it. I hear a lot of people disrespecting, and I hear some respecting. So, you know, that's what a debate's about. My question is surrounded with data. You asked for data, and I want to give you some. Governor Hunt was called the education governor, 12 years. His number priority was pre-K and 5-year-old. He did a wonderful job with what money they gave him, which was a lot. In Asheville, North Carolina, we have the worst in the state of North Carolina for achievement gap, and during the time this pre-K was in existence under him, all these kids has graduated since then, and we are still the worst in achievement gap in North Carolina. So how can you answer that with money? My question.
Pre-K started just after Governor Hunt was governor, but Governor Hunt did start Smart Start. And the purpose of Smart Start was to expand access to high-quality early childhood education and to focus on raising the standards for early childhood education. And you know, I would have to take a look at any data that you cite, but I believe that the peer-reviewed data, the strongest data that exists in this area of public policy, strongly supports high-quality intervention at ages 3, 4, and 5, having very high return on investment, having very clear increases in future test scores and in future reading ability. If Asheville didn't experience that, there may be reasons specific to Asheville regarding leadership of those organizations or funding that was there or not there, funding that maybe you think was there that really wasn't as much as you thought. I tend to think that that's probably the larger part of the explanation. At no point did Asheville have the benefit of widespread pre-K for all of your at-risk 4-year-olds or all of your at-risk 3-year-olds. We've actually never really run that experiment, and I think the evidence points towards giving it a good shot.
May I respond to that? I think we're at the end of our time here. Thank you for making my point better than I did. And I'll add to that New York City, which does early childhood education arguably as well or better than anybody around in terms of getting the kids in the classroom and getting a teacher in the classroom and putting a roof over their head. They have the same problem.
Let's take one more. Did you pick that? You picked that one, so I'm going to pick this one. All right, going all the way in the back row. No one in the back row. Yes, sir.
Well, regarding early childhood education, that's very, very expensive. And those with the resources find a way to give a rich environment to their young children as they're growing up. The question is, if money is not an issue, why is it that we find people who have the money spend it on their children?
I'll tell you why. Hope. hope. They can purchase hope. And I didn't say money didn't matter. I've never said that. Who would say that? I said it was further down the priority list. Twist that all you want, but it's further down the list. It's on the list, but it's down there. Those people, parents who can afford it, are buying hope. But may I point out to you, that doesn't necessarily mean they're succeeding, because the same influences that are affecting all the rest of us, the culture, the drugs, mental health issues, our corrupt legal system, our economy, are affecting those kids too. They have a maybe temporary cushion, but look at the drug abuse track record. Look at the suicide records. Look at so many statistics, and it offers hope, but it doesn't offer them an escape.
There was this Roman senator named Cato. Long time ago. Yeah, Cato fans. It's the antiquities section. By the way, if you take away nothing else, we all got a refresher on the relative size of the planets. There was a Roman senator named Cato, and every time he gave a speech, no matter what the topic, he would always end by saying, "And Carthage must be destroyed." Because he viewed it as so important that no matter what the topic, he needed to break with that discussion and just strongly remind everybody that that needed to occur. So I say to you right now, with the conversation that we've had aside, we must end gerrymandering in North Carolina.
He drove up from Charlotte. Now, I think it was to get access to some of our pubs that he
Go to Highwire next.
This was secondary. You should go with him and learn from him and spend time with him. Obviously a gentleman. I'm delighted in this. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate most of you being patient with me. It is my suggestion that the Democratic Party's Carthage is money. Thank you all.